Alright guys, my name is Metagoblin and welcome to episode 3 of our unusual build series. Today we are featuring the very strange Immortal Warlock tank build. So you're probably thinking, what is this spec all about and how is it going to be useful in classic World of Warcraft? So this is by no means some kind of optimal PvE raiding spec. It's not even an optimal PvP spec, to be honest. This spec is I think it's very strong, but it's only strong in very niche situations. I think predominantly it's going to be really good at defending towers in Untitled Valley, defending bases in Arathi Basin. It's going to be really good at dueling, and it's also extremely good at face tanking elite, just elites in dungeons and out in the world. So if this is some kind of situation, some kind of gold farming exploit or gold farming strategy that you can find that requires you to take down elite enemies, this spec is going to be really useful. Basically making you some gold. So let me jump into the spec, let me tell you what it's all about. So the key talent in this spec is basically Demonic Sacrifice, particularly Demonic Sacrifice when you cast it on the Voidwalker. So when you cast it on the Voidwalker, it restores 3% of total health every 4 seconds. So this might not seem like that great to begin with, but the thing is, because it's 3% of total health, this means it scales the more stamina you have. Okay, the health basically isn't the same every single time. For instance, at the moment it's healing me for about 93 health per 4 seconds, but if I put Ironweave gear on, which is a little bit higher in stamina, that bumps up to 130 every 4 seconds. And if I was decked out in like Nemesis gear or even tier 3, I imagine it would go up to 150 to 200 health per 4 seconds. And obviously when you look at Demon Armor, the tooltip of Demon Armor basically restores 15 health every 5 seconds. We'll talk more about the health per 5 seconds or just health over time effect later on in the video. I'll continue talking about this build. The only other things in here, obviously a lot of the talents in here just buff your demon, which you're not actually going to be using, but what you want is the extra stamina for obvious reasons, and then improved health stone. Those are the key talents from the Demonology tree. And then when you go into the Infliction tree, everything becomes about Drain Life. So basically, you've got instant corruption, but the main thing is improved Drain Life, because that increases your Drain Life effect by 10%. We can increase this further by the tier 2 set bonus as well, but I'll talk a bit more about that later as well. And then the next talent is Fell Concentration. This stops your Drain Life from being interrupted as much when you're being hit in melee combat. To be honest, you really barely notice your channel time on Drain Life ever affected when you have Fell Concentration maxed out. And the next part of this build is a bit of Siphon Life, and then you have an extra 10% extra healing drained by Shadow Mastery decked out as well, bit of extra range on Grim Reach for PvP. The great thing about Nightfall in this spec as well, you may notice that it has a 4% chance to cause your Shadow Bolt to become instant cast every time your corruption ticks, but it also, that chance to happen is also when you drain life. So if you have corruption and drain life on the target, you basically double the chance of your Shadow Bolt becoming instant, so that becomes very good in PvP as well, and also in soloing situations. Amplify Curse and everything else is just a little bit about increasing dot damage. But anyway, let's move on to talking about gear. So when it comes to gear, I've been experimenting with a few options. You can either go the typical way that Warlock's gear, and it's just stacking shadow damage and normal magical damage, because what happens when you stack magical damage is the amount of health drained by Drain Life is actually further increased, and the amount of health you get from Siphon Life is even further increased. The great thing about Siphon Life as well is that when you put it on more than one target, the effect is actually doubled, and it's a really long duration, so in PvP you're basically getting loads of health back. So yeah, I've got basically typical spell power gear, but I'm also experimenting with stacking some HP 5 gear as well. In my experience, the more HP 5 gear you stack, it seems like you become even better at kind of face tanking elite mobs. Another option you can go for is going full Ironweave gear, so I've got a full Ironweave set here. The great thing about Ironweave is, one, it has actually quite high stamina, and also it will bump up your armor stat quite significantly as well. So when I have full Ironweave gear on, this the Demonic Sacrifice heals for quite a lot more. It heals, well, like I said before, it bumps up to 130 health per 4 seconds. So really it's you know, it's up to your experimentation whether you want a little bit extra drain life damage and drain life healing, a little bit more healing basically, or you want to become a bit more stackier and tankier. In my experiments both are actually quite strong. So probably wondering a little bit about the viability of this spec. From personal experience, you know, I'm surviving pretty well in battlegrounds. When I spread my Siphon life onto multiple targets, it's pretty hard for people to kill me. It is kind of difficult though to get a fair test because I'm in really bad gear at the moment, and everyone on this retro WoW server, you know, they're decked out in tier 3 and have legendaries on, so sometimes I'm getting totally one-shotted. So I imagine when you get better gear, this spec will become even stronger. But you know what, I did actually duel someone in tier 2 gear, and I was managing to hold my own against in a lot of duels. People were getting like a lot of damage pumped out into me fairly early on in a duel, but then I was able to get a lot of my health back returned to me, and I was able to just kind of outlive everyone else in a duel. There's also one other application I can see this spec becoming really strong, and that is on the Twin Emperors boss in Anchorage 40-man. So you may not know, but Warlocks have to tank on that boss because one of the bosses is completely immune to physical damage. And normally you get a Warlock and he just kind of decks out in you know, just a tanky kind of build and tanky kind of spells, and spams like Searing Pain and Shadow Bolt to hold aggro. But if you're spamming Drain Life, one, your aggro is massively increased because you're healing on top of doing damage. Drain Life threat is actually quite dangerous, and with this spec you're probably really capable of doing some seriously good tanking, well, range tanking. So that is one thing to bear in mind, but it probably needs a lot of experimentation. I don't have the tools to experiment with that right now. So the last part of this video, I basically want to do a little bit of theory crafting, just kind of theory crafting how better this build can become when you have better gear. So first of all, I want to draw your attention to tier 1. The free set bonus for tier 1 gear increases the amount of drain life bonus you get by an extra 15%. So you're going to get an extra 10% from a talent, you're going to get another 10% from a talent, and then 15% from a talent, for a total of 35% extra drain life healing. So that's something to bear in mind. The next set I want to bear in mind is actually tier 2. We're not actually bearing in mind here the set bonuses themselves, but rather the gear itself. If you look closely, a lot of the gear 1 is really high in stamina, which means the demonic sacrifice buff is going to be massively increased, but also it has its own health per second on the gear. So you know, you've got 4 on the head, you've got 4 on the shoulders and the gloves. I think that's it. So you've got 3 really good best in slot gear pieces with health per second. You can you can take this even further, because there's a lot of really good items with some significant health per second stats. If you look at, I think the best one in the game right now is Molten Core. So this one drops from Ragnaros. It's basically called Shard of the Flame. It has 16 health per 5 seconds. So that's obviously pretty ridiculous trinket. If you stack that with a life stone, you could even get 2 life stones together. Life stones have 10 health per 5 seconds each, so that's another thing to bear in mind. Another good, pretty easy one to get actually is the well, actually it's not that easy because you need a head of the Onyxia, but there's the Onyxia Blood Talisman, which is another trinket with 7 health per second. We've got a few options actually. I've got some written down. You've also got the Frostwolf Insignia, which has health per second. And you've even got this. Don't have it written down there. I did write it down though. The Tattered Hakari Cape, which is a health per second item on the cloak. So let me find that one quickly. So the cloak I'm talking about is called Tattered Hakari Cape. It's actually from some kind of quest in Zul'Gurub, starting from Prospector Iron Boot. So that's another thing to bear in mind. So I've been messing around with this build for quite a while now, and I think one of the best things that this spec is the best at doing really is just face tanking elite enemies. You can just basically out heal the DPS of elite mobs in the game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an experiment of that. You see these enemies on this island right here, they're basically the same as elites. Retro WoW has its own weird kind of world quest system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this enemy. You kind of imagine I'm basically taking down an elite here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop basically all my hots, and then all you have to do really is just face tank with your drain life. And health really just isn't an issue here. Like, I don't even have health stone. One of the health stones made. Probably should. But yeah, actually I think I'm gaining health rather than losing it. It'd be good to see how much healing I'm actually doing. So healing, like heals per second, 100 heals per second. I don't know whether that's good or not. It's probably not like great compared to a healer, but I'm obviously just not struggling to take down these enemies right here. And on this server, most of the time people group up to do quests like this, and I'm just totally fine tanking this on my own. When it, you know, if this situation becomes a little bit more like risky, like I ran out of mana now, I can just easily do a fear. But I mean, I'm pretty much fine. Obviously, your mana will massively drain down, but imagine like you could very quickly do diamore farming or something like that with this build, because there are situations where you do just need to flat out kill elite enemies, and a lot of like you won't need to use like cheesy kind of strategies. You can just face tank enemies and probably get kill quite a few dungeon enemies. So to finish off the video, I just want to show you how fast my health is regenerating out of combat. It's another important thing to bear in mind. Like, it just seems to take like about 250. See, I nearly went up to 3k. It's like 200 health every 5 seconds. You just won't need to stop and eat that much. And even when you do stop and eat, say, let's drain my entire health right now with a life tap, which is another thing to bear in mind, that you won't need to worry about using life tap as much in PvP and PvE situations, because you can just get your health back really quickly. And when you eat, it just rockets up. Like, you won't have to eat. Let's look at the timer on. So most food lasts 30 seconds. Well, I think this food actually lasts less 20 seconds. So yeah, it's pretty much just done. So that's pretty quick. Anyway guys, that's where I'm going to end the video. My name is Goblin. To my next video. Ciao.